from the Center for West Asian Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University. Welcome to the program, Professor Ramakrishnan. We are also joined by N. Venkat Narayan. He is a veteran journalist, a former executive editor of the India Today. Welcome to the program, sir. Ambassador Karju, I'd like to begin with you. First of all, most of these media reports relating to Russia intensifying its military presence in Syria are attributed to Western sources. What credence can be placed on these reports?
Well, the Western sources have given satellite imagery,
right,
to try to establish their claims. But I think let's go to the basic situation. And the basic situation is that the Russians have signaled quite clearly, ever since the Syrian crisis began 4.5 years ago, that they will not let down the Assad regime or the government, and that Russia will do everything in its power to ensure that there is an orderly transition in Damascus. To my mind, that is a crucial principle of Russia when it is dealing with Syria and in its approach to that part of the world, what we call West Asia, North Africa, what others call the Middle East. And in that sense, they've indicated that it is in their the Russians have indicated that it is in their national interest to ensure that they do everything there, and it makes sense because they have a naval presence there, the only naval base that they really have in the Mediterranean, and it's of crucial importance to them. So I go to the basic situation, which is that the Russians will not let go, whatever the Americans, whatever the Europeans say, of the Assad regime, and that is the crucial factor. Now, on the other hand, the Americans' pressure and European pressure is relentless against the government, the Syrian government, and therefore there is a clash. I don't see the Russians relenting despite that pressure.
Right. Professor Ramakrishnan, if you could, for the benefit of our viewers, tell us Russian involvement in Syria, what is at stake for Russia in Syria, and what's been their relationship with that country?
The Russia-Syria relationship was a very important component of Syria's own political history. Say from the 40s itself, when Syria became independent. In the 50s it intensified when Arab nationalism was rising, the bhatt, politics was coming up, especially after the Suez crisis in 1956. When Hafez al-Assad came to power, the first country he visited was Russia, was the Soviet Union then. And you could see that there were innumerable military cooperation in the 70s in a big manner, and that's when the Tartus naval base was set up in the Eastern Mediterranean. So the whole Latakia region that's in the news now has been an important part of Russia-Syria military relationship, and there is increased activity now. You had at the political level the Friendship and Cooperation Treaty between Syria and Russia from the early 80s onwards. So it has been a very close relationship, and the only credible kind of anchor that the Bashar al-Assad regime has at the international level is Russia, and Russian position, as Ambassador Karju has mentioned, has been against regime change in Syria. And Russia wants to be part of any political solution regarding Syria. And there is another dimension now that's coming up in this military build-up, is not only Syrian politics and the whole crisis that you have, refugee crisis, which is affecting Europe in a very big manner, but it's also of the whole problem with NATO. The Eastern Mediterranean region for Russia is so significant in that overall global kind of politics. So both the Syrian situation and the Russia-NATO tussle is an important factor in this new build-up.
Okay. Mr. Narayan, so clearly, this the military relationship between Moscow and Damascus goes back decades, as Professor Ramakrishnan said. When Hafiz al-Assad, Bashar al-Assad's father, was in power, it goes back to that time. Why, are these hyped up concerns being expressed now?
There's, for the simple reason, because for the first time there are Russian feet on the ground in Syria. Right now there are a few hundred people. The Russians claim that they are technicians, experts and all that. But at the same time they are making arrangements to accommodate another 1,500 people, mobile accommodation they are organizing. They have sent 2 nuclear warships, and the Russians are telling the Americans, look what you have done to Iraq and Libya. They're in a mess. And where is the guarantee that if Assad goes tomorrow,
right,
the same thing will not befall? As it is, you have nearly 8 million refugees, and half the country is controlled by the ISIS. And in the last 4.5 years, you have 250,000 people killed. And they're making it very clear, we will not accept a forced regime change. And we want to be involved in the peace process. And while the Russians have got their military presence there,